I'm here today to describe a new ethical and philosophy of law theory that I call the Eusebism. It's my invention, so I know that you have never heard this word before. It's a new term that I have invented, but originally it was coined by the ancient Greek, and the term original was Eusebeia. Eusebeia was used to define a sense of respect of exceptional magnitude, as the two terms used implied eu, that means good, and sebomai, that means to respect, to revere. I have approached this matter while I was writing my PhD thesis in philosophy of law. My interest was particularly focused on animal rights and vegetarianism. Therefore, I faced the main philosophical theories that recognize actual animal rights, or at least human duties towards animals. When I first compared the different theories, I convinced myself that something was missing, as they usually condemn discrimination as a concept. Therefore, they conclude that the principle of discrimination is the same about humans and animals. Not everything that exists is alive, nor human or animal. Just think about plants, rocks, or even about insects that are clearly alive, but usually underestimated by animal rights theories. My approach means to go beyond the above said theories and represents an ethical theory based on the principle of unconditional respect that tries to unify any and all rights under such principle. We are living in what Bobby described as the age of rights, as we can see that new rights, or at least new claims, are rising everywhere, as well as the proposals to recognize new subjects of rights, such as non-human animals. However, are there really so many different rights? Is it possible to identify just one common principle of which all those rights are mere specifications? Eusebism is intended to reunite any relationships and to show how different proposals are simply shifting the discriminations paradigm. For example, from humans to non-humans, from race to gender, etc. Not even trying to remove it at all, due to a misconception at the basics. The Eusebism unifying element is absolute and unconditional respect for everything that exists, and that, since strictly connected, humans, non-humans, the environment, may not be artificially divided, just to consider as good the predominance of one over another. Humanism, animal rights theory, and environmentalism all represent philosophical currents that, even if useful and innovative, still remain confined within objective limitations, since all consider just one element. Until we consider racism, speciesism, sexism, etc. as different questions, we will be unable to actually remove any discrimination. Human rights theories, as well as anti-speciesism, anti-racism, and other anti-thoughts, are unable to found a general and universal theory, not single-issue focused. Right in human society was created to govern the relationship between humans and humans. There weren't any rules in relation to interspecies relationships, or, for example, between man and the environment. There is a fundamental discrepancy in the above. Animals and the environment have always constituted objects for the exercise of certain of these rights, starting with the property. The inclusion of a non-human animal, of a field or of a tree, has never been formally stated, but it was tasted. It is taken for granted that everything non-human is available to humans. In fact, everything different from those who made the laws was considered so, such as slaves, women, poor people, etc. There is a law that is the set of rules codified and incorporated into an order. We call this positive law. Legal positivism states that law is a mere social construction. Natural law theories state that laws should just transpose the principle of nature. According to Bobbio, the persuasion of the existence of an absolute foundation of right would arise as a result of the action of persuasion. The proponents of new rights would reach to believe that their arguments are compelling and undisputed, and that therefore they transcend the individual social context. It was Bobbio's opinion that there is an irremediable contrast between different interpretations of what is natural and what is not. And he assumed that as a proof of this theory's wrongness. I think that Bobbio was wrong, as the existence of different opinions in itself doesn't imply that one may not be correct. This only proves that different people have different ideas. The intellectual aversion that the contemporary age has developed against the natural law has led to contradictions and gimmicks, such as that of the Italian Constitution, that in order to avoid the use of the expression inherent rights, referred to the unalienable rights. Where the first phrase refers to something that inevitably exists before man, the second, in the name of understatement, simply alludes to something that, resisting or not, cannot be denied, removed, disposed, or alienated. But why can it not be alienated if there is not an innate principle? If everything is a source of the will of the lawmaker, who is a citizen of its time and its social-cultural context, why should we consider something intangible? Stating that there are no absolute and innate principles of which laws are mere transpositions contradicts the daily observation. Everybody, even without studying the law, feel deprived when they suffer what they consider an injustice. Anyone considers himself injured if, without having done anything to others, is beaten, killed, deprived of liberty, etc. In my opinion, that does not happen because there are laws, and people know that they have been violated, but because those expectations are innate and prejudicial. We could even not call legal right what is not sanctioned by law, calling it expectation or claim, but that does not change the substance of the instances that are innate, not based on coding, and that do not cease even when laws refuse to acknowledge them. If there was nothing natural, it would be unintelligible and without reason. From the dawn of the laws to date, certain contents have been constantly consolidated, and when rejected, there have been revolutions, wars, and fights to reassert them. The history and the history of law teach that there has been an evolution towards a well-defined purpose, and that when some tried to reverse it, that was a failure. If, as dictated by legal positivism, there were no other rights than those posited, then why, for example, would the dictatorships of the last century have disappeared under the pressure of freedom of expression instances? There are innate aspirations that push in one direction and in one only, which requires training and the adaptation of standards that reflect. The historic route of rights was troubled and sometimes contradictory. I think that this is due to the inability of lawmakers to actually evade their own perspective, merely advocating the interests of their own or their donors or sponsors. For example, the white lawmaker enslaved black people, Aryans banished the Jews, men degraded the women, human beings reified the non-humans, etc. All those law scholars who are not familiar with the animal rights theory may of course consider it illogical, even to think about subjects of law different from humans. It is understood that in my theory animal rights are not the finishing but the starting line. Human animals, non-humans, plants, minerals are all connected by a common origin, and the elements that constitute us are in constant transformation from one state to another. What yesterday was gas in the air or mineral in the ground, tomorrow will be part of an animal body, and so on. Therefore, if I recognize the right to exist in an animal body, how can I deny it to the mineral or vegetable which in turn allowed it to exist? We should have clear the difference between shifting discriminations and removing them at all. While today biocentrism is considered the most advanced and comprehensive theory, I also disagree with it for some reasons. In first place, the definition of what is life is a convention, also subject to criticism and different theories, for example, the virus. Second, not knowing the phenomenon which enables what we consider not alive to become live is not a priori possible to say that an act on the first does not afflict the second, for example, preventing it to come to existence. Third, everything that human science describes as alive can continue to carry out its biological functions only through the use and interaction with what is not alive. All the above said theories are simply trying to extend legal rights or claims without actually giving up a subjective perspective. But they seem to miss the point that in a closed system, which on a large scale can be thought of as the whole universe, we cannot exclude a priori some elements because all are interconnected and interdependent. I can even say that when we discuss about some human behaviors, we use misleading concepts. We can call a racist anyone who is against people of different colors or from different parts of the world, as well as we can call speciesist those who eat animals. I don't think that those people actually hate foreigners or animals. I rather think that they are just selfish and that they prefer to be in charge or are trying to protect themselves from those they consider a menace or simply satisfy their taste. In short, it is clear that humans are largely affected by a problem of selfishness. And each time that we simply move the stick, for example, granting rights to the slaves but not to the animals, we are not removing any and no discriminations. Therefore, we are actually making a discrimination. It makes no sense to talk distinguishing them about human rights, animal rights, the environment. Everything that exists is interdependent, and denying the ownership of rights to some, attributing them only to others, is a short-sighted and arbitrary discrimination, which, by syllogism, does not really allow for the protection of anyone. Nor is it necessary to speak of right, because the words are used only to invoke concepts based on conventions, and it is wrong to stay attached to them so much so as to dismiss the substantial problem, staying anchored to the form. Protection, right, aspiration, expectation, etc. can be used and interpreted endlessly. But the key issue is to implement those absolute moral principles and translate into behaviors and rules that guarantee them. Should we define the system right, law, protection? I don't think that it is important, since the words have only the meaning that people decide to give them. For this reason, I find useless the endless treatises on the meaning of right, given that it is a concept devised by men, therefore describable in any way. By contrast, a moral right is something that must pre-exist to definitions and interpretations. Otherwise, it would be mere will of peoples or individuals. It does not matter. This is where the rules must stand in an impartial and objective light, so that the author may appear to be a man as well as a woman, a human being as well as a non-human, etc. As long as the regulatory principles will be inspired to favoritism towards the lawmaker, what is right cannot find citizenship in laws. As long as our concept of right we leave out the interconnection of everything that exists, it will be forced to grope in the darkness of prejudice and discrimination as a mean of harassment of all, since there can be no respect for anyone if there is not for each. I believe that a unified theory of rights is the only possible solution to exit the crisis, cyclical and inevitable, in which human societies have continued to lie due to the inability to deal fairly with the fundamental questions of existence. Once we have understood and stated the principles to define and describe in them all that exists, as in physics, the right can be considered perfect, that is capable to properly govern any relationship. To exit from the subjective perspective, my theory, the Eusebism, promotes the adoption of 5 basic principles which characterize the moral theory, and that are therefore transferable to right. First, respect for what is other than itself. Second, opportunity, that means repeatability by an undistinguished number of subjects. Third, balance, that means to balance the interests involved, must receive mutual satisfaction. Fourth, circularity, that is the first law of thermodynamics. Nothing is created, nothing is lost, everything turns. Fifth, non-interference, not to interfere with the existence, evolution, or the survival of what is other than itself. In concrete terms, the unification of rights can take place through a reformulation of the rules designed to punish all human conduct detrimental not only directly to other humans, and giving up the notion that those who make the laws can arbitrarily dispose of everything else. The scope of such a change is so radical that today it is hard to imagine the practical application, and it is clear that it will require a long transition for the social values to evolve to such an extent and to be fully applicable to such a regulatory system. However, we should not be discouraged by the complexity and length of time that will be needed to fully realize the change. On the contrary, it is necessary to focus on the importance of beginning it. It is my opinion that even if we focus just on human rights, we can see that the distinctions are confusing, since they should be conceived just as mere specifications of the same principle. From a moral point of view, it should be clear that there is not anything like racism, sexism, speciesism, etc. Those are just symptoms of the innate human aptitude to prevail over others. Once we have this simple fact clear, then we are free to proceed to the next step, to fight against any and all discriminations. Please forgive my bad English.
Well, thank you for a wonderful presentation. When I heard what you say, I feel like you are a kind of Buddha. It sounds like Buddha's preaching. So it's very impressive to me, because you mentioned ego. Ego is a human ego. Only human has ego. So our ego started to destroy this world because of our greediness. We want more. We want more and more and more. Then this kind of greediness will destroy this world in the end. So we have to control our ego. Then, is it correct? Control ego?
Yeah, of course.
How to control it?
This is what, in my opinion, we have to focus, because I think that Gandhi said that many years ago, that the first revolution is inside us, not outside. So it is our ego that has to be controlled, and of course our feelings and also our thoughts have to be changed to change the world outside. This is the first step.